set? Good to go. I'm going to go ahead and call this May 7th, 2018 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for attending this evening, and I would ask Ben Davis to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's a gentleman that works for the city on a contract basis that you don't see much, but he sits behind the wall here. His name's Jake Cook. He keeps us, our AV system in check and all the video and online services for the city going. And I'd just like to wish Jake a very happy birthday. It was Jake's birthday yesterday. He turns 47, I think. So happy birthday to Jake Cook. Next on our agenda is communications from the public, and this is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are on the agenda but not advertised as a public hearing. So this is your opportunity to present to the council, share ideas, concerns, anything you wish. Just for the record, your name and address when you do approach the podium. Any public comment this evening?
Judy Hesselin, 786 7th Street West. I do want to say, I just went up to the top of this parking lot because I want to talk on parking. You guys have got an awesome view up there. When are we going to have a party up on the roof? We have a parking problem right now. I've noticed more and more buildings are going in that are lot line to lot line, no parking. And if you just go, let's just go to Whitefish River and start with Miles and Highway 93. That building built a parking lot for both its clients and its customers. Otherwise, the only people who have parking lots are grocery stores, the credit unions, and the banks, and the post office. The post office has 3. And both Whitefish Credit Union and the post office have one for their employees. So they have parking. But we're now building buildings, and it started out great. The first ones were 2007, 2008 that they built at the end of O'Brien. And when they went in, and they're really neat buildings, and they're residential and commercial, that street became basically one way because everyone parked in the street. We've had a lot of buildings go lot line to lot line, which I think is a great idea. I mean, it maximizes your profit. But having had a business in both a mall and a strip mall, I had to pay for the parking. That was part of your lease agreement, was you paid a certain amount for the parking. People are getting away with putting in commercial, no parking. The only parking we have at that end of 93 is the Riverview Plaza, the Whitefish Community Center, and you skip over to the Davidson building. They're the only ones who have parking there, and then the rest of the banks. I think it would be great if the city could rethink the parking ordinance, maybe having a workshop, having people come in and bring questions about it. I know that in other places, like in our downtown, in the summer you can't park. They had other tourist towns I know had like 2 or 3 parking spots that were 15 only. So the locals could run in and grab something like a whatchamacallit or a thingamajiggy from the hardware store. The other problem is the new building behind Presbyterian Church. It sticks further in the alley, and I don't know how those people are going to be able to park. There's not enough room to turn a car in and go straight in. When I drove by it, it's taller, it's bigger, and maybe we need to rethink that, the WB zoning, and bring in the properties at least 5 feet from the alley so that the dump truck, a fire truck, whatever can get down the alley. I think we're going to see down in a real problem coming up. And those are concerns which I think will help the city if we can address them and get them changed. One of the things they did is on studios and one-bedroom apartments, they can have less parking. Well, there's a 5-bedroom house next door to me that has 11 cars. Now, that means there's 2 people in each bedroom and 1 extra. And so we've got to rethink because everyone gets in their car. So I was telling someone at one time, people were upset. They tore down Paradise and built a parking lot. That was horrible. But everyone has a car, takes the car. If even someone comes here without a car, they rent a car. So I feel it's something that we need to think on, put on an agenda somewhere, and I don't know where. I was told you guys do the parking ordinances. And so I'm just requesting maybe a workshop and bring the public in and try to work something out before we have absolutely no parking. We'd all park on the roof. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. I normally don't respond to public comment, but I will because she brings up an important point and something that the city is working on currently in the downtown business district or the commercial core. Commercial developments aren't required to provide parking upon development, only residential uses are. We've identified this as a concern, and the city's currently evaluating a new ordinance that would require either cash in lieu for parking or commercial uses actually having to provide parking upon development. But it's incorrect to state that the downtown businesses have not helped contribute towards parking because we did have an SID back in the mid-'80s that helped pay for the second and Spokane surface lot as well as the third and central surface lot as well as the new SID, which was basically a continuation of that former SID to help fund capital purchase of the parking structure just to the north of City Hall. So it is something we are working on, and we understand that it's an issue that needs to be addressed, and you'll be notified when we do hold public hearings to that effect. Is there any other public comment tonight? Further public comments? Not seeing any. I'll close the public comment period, but stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? How about the council? Not seeing any, and moving right along, we will move on to our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the April 16th minutes, or can I have a motion for approval? Frank.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Michelle, which brings us on to our one presentation this evening, which is item 6A, consideration to approve a financial commitment to the Whitefish Housing Authority for a potential low-income housing tax credit project in an amount not to exceed $150,000 and a letter of support indicating the financial commitment and city support of the project. Adam.
From the Whitefish Housing Authority to kind of give a very short update presentation on how things are going. You have my staff report before you. It's all information that we've had before. They've come to a work session here a month or so back. So they're just going to kind of update on things, but I thought, you know, just in case there are people in the public that didn't quite catch some of the history, I thought I'd rehash that a little bit here in the staff report. But at the end of the day, one of the things I want to point out is this will be placed in the budget if approved, and then it'll get approved along with the normal budgetary process, which will contain public hearings and things of that nature. But other than that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Adam. Welcome. Good to see you.
Nice to see you all again. Thank you for the opportunity to give a little bit of detail and make this formal request to the council tonight. My name is Heather McMillan. I'm the Housing Development Director for Homeward. We're a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Missoula, Montana, and we, just for the benefit of the audience and those who haven't heard us talk about this project, we are a CHODO, Community Housing Development Organization, and we also have housing counseling and financial education. We are proud to be trying to figure out how to advance the slide. Hold on.
go.
Yep, there we go. We'll work through it the hard way. So yes, we are a nonprofit, but we're most proud of the fact that we are working currently with the Whitefish Housing Authority on a project to serve low to moderate income individuals. There was some communication earlier tonight prior to the meeting about defining affordable housing. This particular project itself will be deed restricted affordable for the next 46 years and serve Whitefish residents earning 60 to 40% area median income. So it's truly defined as affordable housing in one slice of what we call workforce housing and overall, and some of the things identified in your your affordable housing plan. One of the things I thought would be helpful tonight was to, in your board packets, you were able to see a lot of the homeward projects. This one project in particular I'm going to use as an example because it's part related to the requests that we're making to you later tonight. This is Sweetgrass Commons. It's in the central Missoula, 27 units. It's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. But what's most important about this project was how the city committed support to this project, and both on a discussion end, but also on a financial end, and it's what helped us leverage other financing to make this project possible. One slide you haven't seen, and if you can follow along with me, is that during Sweetgrass Commons, we had a really high land price, similar to what you all face here in Whitefish. The seller wanted market rate, and it was for a half an acre, very expensive, but this is a project that was close to the central core of Missoula, trails, sewer and water, fire districts, schools and jobs. So we were committed to making this project work, and the city was able to use their tax increment financing to essentially, the seller sold at market rate, the city of Missoula purchased the land and sold it back to us for a reduced value. And what that did was not only reduce the cost of the project, it leveraged 2 different very critical funding sources. It gave us points in our Federal Home Loan Bank application for their AHP program, which was another $230,000 of funding. And then it also secured and got the Montana Board of Housing's attention enough to give us one of 22 applicants. There were 5 that were funded that year, and they were awarded Sweetgrass Common these funds. I give you that detail because it's going to fall in line with what I'm going to present to you later in the request that the Housing Authority and Homeward are making of you tonight. I've bored you with the structure of the low-income housing tax credits and how it works. I just really want to show you that what's very important on June 4th, 2018, there will be over 20 applications to the Montana Board of Housing. Community members from all the communities around Montana with these letters of interest being submitted will come and present. The board will ask questions, they'll discuss the merits of the project, and then they will only ask 8 of us to apply. This is a critical point in the process. If we don't get invited to apply, we're kind of dead in the water, so to speak, so we really want to put our best foot forward. So part of our request tonight is to ask you to help us support that request. Part of the uphill battle that you guys will face, because you're Whitefish, Montana, is that you all just during Columbia Falls and Kalispell, you're all just part of the same community, or at least that's the way the state looks at it. So it'll be our job to help articulate that request and define Whitefish, define the characteristics of Whitefish and how you are not all one community, and that you're paying $2 to $3 extra an hour for people to commute from those communities to work in Whitefish, and it's very difficult to find a place to live. So that will be a huge part of our presentation. I wanted to show you that we have been working on this project. I think 2 hours ago, secured a parcel on Edgewood. Is that right? Okay, yep, 2 hours ago it came in while I was driving up. But we do have the land tied, and it's actually secured in a way that is a shared risk for the seller and for us as the potential buyer. So there'll be different levels of that buy-sell executed as we work through getting the different funding, especially the low-income housing tax credits. So there's just a little bit of information on this slide. We did a bit of a graphic. We've worked on the site and laid out what we think will be a 38-unit project. We will do more work in time for the application to be submitted formally, but this just gives you a flavor of what we're looking at, a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. And I hate to be rushing, but I know we only have a few minutes, but really we're here tonight to ask you for your support of the project. We've been in front of working sessions, we've been to the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, and right now we've distilled it down into the best way the city can support this project is one, to provide a letter of support for that letter of interest, and then maybe hop on a bus with some of the Whitefish Housing Authority board members and head to Helena to testify about this project. But most importantly, we're asking for financial support for this project. And it's not a small ask. I don't ask without a heavy heart. I know that funds are difficult to come by, but I believe that we can leverage the funds that we are asking tonight into a much larger project and bring in a lot of outside resources with that money and that contribution. So again, June 4th is very important, and if we're invited to apply, November 19th will be another important date. So this is where I sit up here and I talk like a developer and I wave my hands, and you have to trust me, but I'm going to walk you through what we're proposing. This is complicated, but it's how we believe we can leverage a contribution by the city and maximize it for its best value. We have a patient seller. He's willing to work with us and step through those different increments of risk. What we're proposing is that the city of Whitefish, just like the city of Missoula, purchase the land and sell it back to the housing authority, Whitefish Housing Authority, at a reduced value. That right now is measured at $150,000 per the feedback we received at the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, as well as working with Adam and the city of Whitefish. Then, at that point, the Housing Authority will save part of that parcel for a future housing development, and we'll take as much as we need to do the 38 units. And the Housing Authority will also put in another $50,000 into this project and this land acquisition. And in short, we can reduce the land value down to an estimated $280,000, which is 42% below what the market rate value is for that land. I can walk you guys through the math and answer any questions around that, but the long and the short of it is we are going to be competing against 300 other projects in the Federal Home Loan Bank AHP process between Des Moines, Iowa, and Seattle, Washington. And of those 300 projects, 70 will be funded. The larger percentage, we can write down that cost below market and have a project jurisdiction like the city of Whitefish and the Housing Authority write down that cost of land will give us more points in that application. And that's why we were able to secure the $233,000 for Sweetgrass, and we estimate about $300,000 for this project. Also, the Montana Board of Housing insists on community support of this project when we apply, and they will be rating you against those 20 other applications. And to date, the only other 9% low-income housing tax credit that's ever seen a city's contribution of what we're proposing tonight is that project, the city of Missoula, writing down the cost of that land by $250,000 with TIF financing, which is similar to what we're proposing of scale for you all. That got their attention. We don't have any state housing resources. They're all federal or outside. And to leverage Federal Home Loan Bank in and have a city commit their funds, which are critical for many other uses other than housing, is a huge sign of support and will get their attention. And we believe after the third try and our first as the Housing Authority and Homeward, we can get this project funded and get you 38 new units of affordable housing. And so that's the request crafted by not just Homeward, the Housing Authority, and in conjunction with the city. Your project outcomes will be 46 years of affordability at a minimum, units that are deed restricted, affordable housing under the HUD definition. You guys have larger housing goals as well, but this is one of the critical ones you're trying to hit. A mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, the rents ranging from $360 to $780 a month. We will be the guarantor. We are the tax credit experts. We'll be co-owners with the Housing Authority. They will be the long-term owners of this project, so it will stay in your community. And if for any reason the Housing Authority can't own and manage, we're there as a backstop. So that's the request in a nutshell, and I was trying to be quick and respectful of time, but I'd be happy to take any questions and talk in any more detail around this.
Thanks very much. That was very informative. Any questions at this time of the council? They may arise, so stick around.
All right, thanks.
I do see some members of the Housing Authority. Would you like to provide any comments on behalf of the authority? Or Ben?
Sure. Thank you, Heather, by the way. I'm your board chair for the Whitefish Housing Authority as well as the Housing Steering Committee. I just thought I'd say, we've tried this before, 2 out of the last 3 years for tax credit applications, and it has not been successful. And so this time we are trying a very new approach with the Housing Authority being a lot more hands-on with the project and actually helping to develop this project. We think we have an excellent partner with Homeward. They know exactly what they're doing. We think we found an excellent site, the former trailer park over there behind the former Piccolo Pizza. And we're excited. We think we're going to have a very strong application. And I think that the process is competitive. There are a lot of other applications out there. And a key differentiator is the financial contribution and the desire from the community. And I think in terms of things we're doing differently to make this application be successful, I don't want to trivialize, the financial contribution, but it is very important, I think, to the success of the project, and it is going to be your best return in terms of dollars per unit and per what you get, because those rents that come out of this project are almost unachievable in the private sector. And this is the largest source of affordable housing dollars in America, is these tax credit projects. And, we are way overdue, frankly, in this town for one. It's been identified as a high priority item from our steering committee and others. And I think this is a big step for the Housing Authority, and I think it's an important step for the town. And so I would appreciate your support.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate the comments. Back to the council for discussion or hopefully a motion. Katie.
I would move to approve a financial commitment to the Whitefish Housing Authority for a potential low-income housing tax credit project in an amount not to exceed $150,000, and a letter of support indicating the financial commitment and the city's support for the project.
I second.
Close. Wow. Seconded by Ryan. Further discussion on the motion? I would just like to state for the folks that are here tonight or even watching on TV, that $150,000 is significant, but it's not coming out of the city's general fund. It's not general property tax dollars, so it's not going to hit your tax bill, just for the record. And it's a perfectly wise use of tax increment financing, because deteriorating housing stock was identified in our 1987 urban renewal plan. So it's a logical use for TIF funds, and something we probably should have moved on years ago. With that said, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Heather. Appreciate your time tonight. Thanks, Ben. We will move on to our public hearings. We have 4 public hearings scheduled tonight, and we'll start with item 7A, which I imagine is why most of you are here this evening, which will be Ordinance 18-14, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish approving the Trail View preliminary plat and planned unit development to develop a 58-lot single-family residential neighborhood on the property at the corner of Monaghan and Vorman Roads, located at 1180 Vorman Road, Whitefish, and this is on a first reading. Wendy.
Okay, good evening. The request before you is a preliminary plat with a PUD overlay, planned unit development overlay, for 58 single-family residential neighborhood. The property is located at the southwest corner of Monaghan and Vorman Roads and is 8.8 acres. Access to the neighborhood will be via 2 points off of Monaghan Road. There will be a single north-south private road serving the proposed homes. Each home will front on a common open space, and private alleyways will serve as vehicular access. The private road is proposed to have sidewalks on the west side and 90-degree angle on-street parking as well. At this time, no improvements will be made to Monaghan Road, as the city has planned improvements to the sewer treatment plant, and the reconstruction of Monaghan is proposed to be part of that project once the sewer treatment plant is completed, and the applicant will pay its share of improvements along the frontage. The applicant's proposing to develop the project in 3 phases. The north 13 lots will be phase 1, then the central 30, and then finally the southern 15. Infrastructure is installed to serve each phase as they are developed. The applicant is proposing extensive open space areas, including parkland dedication on the north side of the project, which is 1.56 acres. They're also proposing a 20-foot trail easement along the western boundary of the project. Did you change? Oh. Okay. So the trail will connect to the city's Roxon Trail that's near the parks maintenance building, and then up to Borman Road. There's smaller open spaces within the development that will serve as the front doors for the homes and access to the other open space areas. In addition to the subdivision, the applicant's proposing a planned unit development overlay over the entire project. This is needed for density bonuses and to accommodate the design of the project. The project has a density of 6.59 dwelling units per acre. With a PUD overlay, it permits up to 7 dwelling units per acre, provided 10% of the units are affordable. They're asking for a few zoning deviations, including setbacks, building height, lot area, lot width, and parking. In exchange for these zoning deviations, the applicant's proposing 100% of the project be affordable, with half the homes traditional deed restriction based on income, and half the homes be for local workers, but not income restricted. Under the PUD chapter, the applicant's only obligated to provide 10% affordable housing, which is 6 units. In addition, the applicant is also proposing to dedicate more parkland than required under the subdivision regulations, the extension of the Roxon Trail along the western boundary. They're also requesting a couple of subdivision variances, including the street standards. It's a little bit narrower with parking on one side and a sidewalk on one side, and then the design using flag lots for more than 50% of the lots. The property is zoned WR1, which is an urban zoning designation. It's surrounded by a rural residential, and the parks maintenance building to the south. We did notice adjacent landowners within 300 feet of the property, post a sign, and notice advisory agencies, as well as placed a legal in the paper. We received a number of comments, which are in your packet, and then we received a bunch more that are attached to the back of the packet after planning board hearing. Neighbors are concerned about the density being out of character with the neighborhood, an increase in traffic cutting through the Creekwood neighborhood, a need for traffic calming within neighborhood, the need for improved infrastructure for the area of town before any development is approved, including Borman to 7th Street connection, better pedestrian facilities, paving Monaghan, and overall drainage plan for the entire neighborhood. There are concerns about high groundwater, drainage impacting neighbors to both the east and west of the project, impacts on wildlife, and questions about the details of the affordable housing aspects. We review subdivisions according to the criteria in the subdivision regulations, and hit kind of some of the highlights there. The applicant did submit a traffic impact study, because that's required under our engineering standards. According to the study, at full build out, the project would generate an average of 684 daily trips. 41% of those trips would use Park Avenue, a little more than a third would use Creekwood, and then the remaining would use Monaghan and Borman roads. According to the engineer's report, the intersection studied will continue to function within acceptable levels. There's no map crucial wildlife habitat or seasonal daily migration corridors. We did notify Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, so we didn't receive any comments from them. This area is being mapped as a potentially high groundwater area, and it is in the process of being currently monitored. This is the season to be doing that work. There is one map stormwater conveyance along the north portion of the project that's going to be set aside. It's actually going to be located within the parkland dedication. Again, they're monitoring groundwater, which is part of the information that's used for drainage. There are some concerns with downstream flows and other design-specific standards that will need to be addressed. So the Public Works Department suggested a couple of conditions of approval that will require drainage analysis and capacity and looking at the downstream conditions for a minimum distance of 1/4 mile from the project. They also want to look at alternative routes for impacts to downstream properties, and they're suspecting that additional area for stormwater is going to be needed as part of the preliminary plat, and so they also suggested a condition that may require the elimination of some of the lots in order to accommodate the drainage issues. As I mentioned earlier, the streets are going to be privately owned and maintained, but open to the public, the streets and the alleyways. Again, they're only proposing to install a sidewalk on one side of the street with 90-degree parking on that one side. Again, Monaghan Road is currently unpaved and an unimproved city street, but the city will be working on getting that road paved as part of the sewer treatment plant. In addition, the developer is going to dedicate a 10-foot right-of-way along their frontage because it's only a 40-foot wide right-of-way, and 60 feet is, of course, our standard. In lieu of installing a sidewalk along Monaghan Road, because we're proposing it to be a rural street section, we do have, the subdivision regulations allow us to have a developer put in a city trail, so that's what they're proposing to do along that western boundary. Over 60% of the project's being set aside in open space, including the parkland and then the open space areas in the middle of the clusters of the houses. That 1.56 will be dedicated to the city as part of the parkland dedication for the subdivision and could be developed at some point in the future, but the city doesn't have any plans to do that right now. Again, the trail would go from the Roxon Trail at the south end and then all the way up to Vorman Road. And this trail is part of the 2016 Ped Bike Master Plan. Locating the trail along the western boundary keeps the path from having to cross driveways or streets. It'll keep it in an open space area. We took this design and the plan to the Ped Bike Committee in February, and the committee was in support of the trail, and they recognized the value of the trail within the development and kind of off of Monaghan Road for safety purposes and then for snow removal. So this project is also, of course, using the PUD overlay, and there's a number of review criteria. And I just point out too that this is under the old PUD ordinance, so not the new one that just recently went into effect. They are providing usable open space. They're setting aside 60% in open space areas, including trail, open space areas in between the homes, and then the 1.56 acres of parkland. This project is probably not necessarily considered infill, but it has an urban land use designation and an urban zoning, and it's right on the edge of the urbanizing city limits. Under street connectivity and continuity, the streets are not intended to provide any connectivity. The connectivity that they're providing is through the implementation of the Ped Bike plan that would connect that trail system. And again, the Monaghan Road is designed to be is proposed to be a rural section. Under providing affordable housing, the applicant is requesting a density bonus beyond the 4 dwelling units per acre. So they are permitted to go up to 7, and they're at 6.59. And as such, they're only obligated to provide 6 dwelling units. 10% of the units have to be affordable. And the zoning defines area median moderate income families as those families making 60 to 125% of area median income. And again, they're proposing 100% of the units will be deed restricted, with half of them being set aside for local workers for a priority of folks in the 59937 zip code, and half of them being price limited to serve a particular AMI within our community. So we are recommending a condition of approval that income served be between the 80 to 150% of AMI, and that they be dispersed throughout the neighborhood and located within each of the different phases. Planning Board did hold a public hearing on April 19th, and they did recommend approval, subject to the 23 conditions found in the transmittal letter to you. They also recommended approval of the zoning deviations and the subdivision variances. We did have 8 folks from the public stand up and express concerns about the project. Just to hit some of the highlights of the conditions of approval. Again, the drainage conditions from the Public Works Department about the evaluation of drainage a 1/4 mile away from the subdivision, and then possibly setting aside additional area for stormwater detention. We're requesting 10-foot dedication along Monaghan Road and pavement of their share of improvements to Monaghan Road at the time of final plat, and work with the Public Works Department to determine what that rate would be. We'd like to see the Roxon Trail extension be constructed with phase 1. the parkland dedication to occur at Phase 1, that the internal roads are open to the public. 10% of the 10% of the units must be deed restricted to serve moderate income families as defined by the zoning regulations, and have 2 of those located within each phase. And then the applicant would enter into deed restrictions for the remaining units with the city at the time of final plat, with the priority for local workers for half of them, and then providing housing for 80 to 150% of area median income for the other half of those units. And then I think that's about it. Can I answer any questions? I also have some aerial maps, so if you want to see where this is in context with the larger neighborhood, as well as a little snapshot of the transportation plan showing where that route would be as well. And then the applicant has some other slides too.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy? Frank?
Wendy, I like the concept of Whitefish area workers being, how is that practically enforced, used, managed? I work here now. Next week or next month, I get a job in Kalispell. Do I have to move out? I mean, how is this supposed to work?
Yeah, I think it's at the time of purchase. Yeah, that we would, ensure that whoever purchases the house, they're working or in Whitefish or 59937, but if they get promoted and get a new job, they're still living here.
Further questions for Wendy? Not seeing any. I do imagine the applicant is here this evening, Stephen Flink. And we will be opening a public hearing on this item. We will start with the applicants or applicant's representative, and then we'll move on to general public testimony from the audience.
All right, Stephen Flink, represent Bryant Flink Architecture and Design, 2305 Westbury Avenue, Littleton, Colorado, address. Representing the applicant, Trailview subdivision. So I'd first like to touch on, highlight some of the findings from the Whitefish Workforce Housing Needs Assessment that was done in 2016. Excuse me. That study found that the inventory of affordable homes within the Whitefish area is very low. The Trailview subdivision is proposing to provide 58 affordable units. All 58 of the units would be workforce housing at an affordable rate. Homes below 300,000 are typically older and in poor conditions, the study found. This development is new construction, obviously brand new homes. New construction is not targeting the local workforce housing, was another finding. This project, 100% of the homes are specifically targeting the local workforce housing market within Whitefish. Preferred product types are single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes with garages and or extra storage space. Our particular solution, we honed in on the single-family residences. We felt that this product not only fits in with the findings of the Workforce Housing Needs Assessment, but it also fits in nicely with the character of some of the adjacent subdivisions that are all single-family residences. Finally, touching on that's the needs assessment, the study forecasted that through 2020, 400 ownership units were needed. Based on the housing assessments estimate, the 58 units provided by the Trailview subdivision will account for nearly 15% of the community's workforce housing need through 2020. So this image here shows kind of the context of the site at Monaghan Road in Vorman, the greater kind of downtown Whitefish area. The inner dash circle there represents a half-mile radius, and then the outer 1 mile. You can see that within this larger context, the proximity of this site to the school system, nearby healthcare facilities, retail options, recreation, city services, and the many and numerous job opportunities along the 93 corridor, as well as the in the downtown area, positions this site perfectly for this type of development. From a larger kind of citywide traffic perspective, the central location will help limit the amount of travel residents will undertake to achieve their daily routines. So I would like to touch on kind of density and how we arrived at the unique kind of arrangement of the homes on the site. We utilized a piece of the code, the cluster development strategy within the subdivision section, which allows for smaller lot sizes and unique arrangements in order to achieve and maximize open space on your site. So you can see that we clustered 10 homes around much smaller open spaces. As Wendy alluded to, all the homes, the front doors front these open spaces. The alleys are at the backs of the homes. Each cluster, the backs face each other, and then the front doors face each other. On the ends, the front doors actually face outwards. So as you perceive the site from Vorman Road or Monaghan Road, you're not really looking at people's garage doors or the backs of their homes. You're looking at the front doors and these open spaces. We put the parkland dedication on the north side of the site. The stormwater conveyance area kind of lended itself to dividing the site nicely there. We also felt that it was a good area to buffer our development from the adjacent Creekwood development to the north. Along the west side of the site is where our trail easement is. That's a 20-foot trail easement, and it connects all the way to the south where the city trail currently is existing, and will go all the way to the parkland dedication. Once at the parkland dedication, there's numerous options and flexibility with how that trail crosses it. You have the ability to get to Vorman Road and connect into Creekwood Drive to the west. Or there's another option. There's an easement at the southeast corner of the Creekwood subdivision, and there's potential there to just have a crossing at Vorman Road, which would eliminate any need for having people walking up and down Vorman Road, which right now is just drainage ditches. There's no sidewalks or improvements there. Continuation of the trail system is important. The affordable housing bonuses in the code, as touched on earlier, we can do 7 units per acre. We're only providing 6.6, so there are 4 homes that are being left on the table. I know we've talked about smaller lots, smaller lot widths, smaller setbacks, and these items directly relate to smaller homes and smaller house footprints. We are not asking for any variances on the lot coverage sizes. So as we're decreasing the lot sizes, we're decreasing the home footprint as well. So these homes vary from 900 square feet to 1,300 square feet. The actual footprint varies from 500 square feet to 900 square feet. So the footprints are very small. We are parking on the lots. We are asking that the 1 bedrooms only provide 1 parking stall on the lot. The 2 bedrooms are all providing 2 stalls per lot. We are providing 57 stalls along the internal drive, so that's almost 1 visitor stall or excess stall per unit. The phasing of the project, we're going to do the first 13 homes on the north side of the site here, and then build out this connection into Monaghan. The next phase will be 32 homes, and then the final phase would be 13 at the end here. Those phases are estimated right now, the first phase in 2019, the second phase in 2020, and the third phase in 2021. So we're looking at a 3-year to 4-year full build-out period. I do want to touch on the traffic a little bit. Wendy stated earlier that we're going to be at full build-out 684 daily trips. That is actually 684 weekly trips. That week is denoted by 5 days, 5 working days. So in phase 1, the 13 homes, we could expect 32 trips per day. Phase 2, you could expect per day an additional 73. Phase 3, with the 13 homes, you would expect an additional 32. So your total daily trips are not 684, but 137 per day. And that really, so a height comparison. We wanted to touch on also the lot widths and the heights that we're asking for. So when it's stated that the lots are 37 feet wide, not all the lots are 37 feet wide. Of the 58 lots, there's only 12 lots that are actually that smaller lot size. The majority of lots are wider at 44 feet to 50 feet. The site is not perfectly square, so they grow and shrink as you kind of move north along Monaghan Road. As far as the heights go, again, we're not asking for all 58 of the homes to go over the 35-foot height limit. We're actually only identifying 12 of those homes to go over the height limit. On the left of this image, you can see a nearby adjacent home for kind of scale, size. It's approximately 32 feet in height. Majority of our homes, you can see on the far right, are 30 feet in height. Again, about 12 of the homes will be 37 feet, and then additional 12 at only 29 and a half feet as kind of a starting concept for how the heights and the sizes of the homes are going to shake out. These are some of the perspectives of the homes. We've got 2-bedroom options, 1-bedroom options. Some of the homes have first floor parking garage, and then 2 levels of living above. That's the home on the left. Smaller homes in the middle, which would be potentially 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. And then one of the larger homes that would be on the site is still only a 2-bedroom, but you do get a bonus room, and it's at 1,300 square feet. All options have a garage. They have extra storage space, which is something that is cherished, especially in an outdoor community like Whitefish. This is a perspective that we did, kind of showing the quality and character of what these open spaces could potentially be, activated with pedestrian paths, different landscape zones, some areas that are more manicured. But this is what we feel like it could be like in the open spaces. And at this time, I'd like to ask our civil engineer, Sam, to come up and speak to some of the stormwater and improvements to Monaghan Road.
Thank you. So first, I'll kind of touch on the utility aspects of this project. I'll say, not only is the Trailview subdivision really trying to address the affordable housing, but we also want to make sure that any infrastructure that we're improving the overall system for the city. So specifically with water right now, the preliminary engineering that we've done is identified there's 2 dead-end mains currently in that area. We would be connecting those 2 and kind of bringing that loop into the system, which would help with some stagnant water. It would also gain access to any future development that's going to come off of that area, being able to utilize that water resource there. We will be providing full-on fire capacity, everything associated with the development. The other big element with the utilities stems from the sewer standpoint. We're a little restricted based on the location and the depth of existing mains in the area. The preliminary study that we originally went with after working with city utilities was to propose a low-pressure sewer system to run to that area that would tie into the Shady River Lane development. However, as we've started to also explore various things with the storm drainage and trying to improve or mitigate any impacts to the western property owners, it's become apparent that it's very likely that we will be trying to work with the city and developing a southern reroute of some of that stormwater that's collecting on Monaghan Road and also our project site. With that, we'll also be gaining access to the main sewer main that would give us the opportunity to explore a gravity main. And in doing so, that gravity main would now run and extend all the way to Monaghan Road, giving you access or the ability to serve future developments. like I said before, our original plan, just looking for the feasibility from this subdivision, was to propose low pressure. But I think I can speak on behalf of the developer that we would prefer, not only for the homeowners, the future homeowners here, to be on a gravity system, but we would certainly prefer to extend a gravity service to the adjacent property owners for when the time comes to serve them, or the potential to serve them. And I think by exploring that southern reroute of the drainage, we'll be working in that area, which will help facilitate reducing some of the costs associated with getting that gravity main there. It's been acknowledged a major concern here is drainage. I think it's very apparent. All you have to do is drive through the project amidst the runoff, and there's a lot of standing water in the ditches. There's a lot of water running through the property. I had an opportunity to speak with the western property owner, and certainly appreciate his concern for the impacts that he's already received due to development onto his property. For that reason, our preliminary grading plan actually regraded the site and really tried to move a big chunk of this on-site stormwater that would be generated on the project to the south. That was based off of a preliminary engineering report that was done for Monaghan Stormwater Improvement that had identified a southern reroute of that stormwater. I mistakenly assumed that one had been vetted to a greater extent, and now understand it hadn't. However, I think the solution, or the preferred alternative that was proposed in that plan, conducted, I believe it was 2014, was finalized for the city. I think it's a good approach. I think it's something that we need to explore. We did do some preliminary engineering to see the feasibility of it. We'd probably be looking at about a 12 to 1,300 lineal foot run. But the benefit is our outflow would now be the Whitefish River. So we would not be outflowing onto private property. We'd be moving some of that water that is currently impacting the western property owner. We'd be moving it away from that. And ultimately, the water is getting to the exact same, that water is eventually going to the Whitefish River. We would just be rerouting so it's not impacting that property owner. In return, I think it becomes a critical piece to improving Monaghan as well. By getting that stormwater route developed on the south end of the property, and then down along the trails corridor, we would be able to move much of that water that's generated to the east of the project through there, and thus reducing the impact that we're being seen right now. That study's active. It's a complex design. There's a reason that what you see in our current package is preliminary, and that's because there's a lot of things we have to explore. One of them is, what is the groundwater, what's going on there, detailed topo. But we've committed to working with the city and the adjacent property owners and trying to bring forward a design that is not only sufficient in dealing with the stormwater needs of Trailview, but really helps address some of the known issues and concerns that are already being felt by adjacent property owners. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Any questions? Not at this time. Not to say they won't come up, though.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. Name and address for the record, please.
Jerry Dunker, 84 Armory Road in Whitefish. I just wanted to quickly touch on a few things that Rita right there talking about. One thing with Sam, with the drainage, there won't be any crawl spaces or basements in these homes. There'll all be slab on grade to eliminate any need for sump pumping or anything like that. One other thing on the public comments that I know we're going to hear a lot about is the safety through Creekview Drive. And the one big unknown and no way to predict is how many school-age children we're going to have in this development of small homes. But whatever that number is, they're going to also want safe passage, whether they're riding or walking or biking, and we want to continue to work with the city and the neighborhood to find solutions to that. I think one good solution that we brought up tonight was potential that easement off of Orman Road. So there's only one crossing, which is at a stop sign right now, even if it's temporary until the future development next to that goes, and the trail will hopefully go through. And also had one ask, this is being a privately funded development like this, very tight budget, it's on a fixed revenue model, and we'd like to ask the city to consider eliminating condition 15, which is paving of the trail. We're going to give the easements, but any requirements from the city, like paving the public road, the trail, extensions of city services. They directly add to the cost of these homes, making them slightly less affordable. So we just like the council to consider eliminating that as a condition for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Who's next? Is the applicant you complete? Okay. We'll take public comment now. Anyone wishing to provide comment, just name and address for the record, please, when you approach the council. Any public testimony this evening on this item? Bill.
I'll go first.
You're seasoned.
Yes, thank you. Bill Kale, 1037 Creekview Drive in Whitefish, Montana. Thank you, city councilors, for your dedication and service. I know sometimes it can be a thankless job, particularly these late meetings, but we certainly appreciate you guys keeping our towns safe. I want to start by saying that I support the idea behind the Trailview subdivision. Tonight we heard about another affordable housing program, and I think that affordable housing is absolutely critical to the hometown feel that we have, and also keeping the diverse multi-generational fabric that we have in our town. I think that we're unique. I think we're starting to lose that a little bit, so I think that having an effort for affordable housing is important. I do have concerns, however, with this particular design, not the project itself. I think it's beautiful. I think the design is actually very, very good. Don't have a problem with Trailview itself. I have a problem with the impact, and I'm going to put the onus on you guys. I think it's a problem that really the city needs to solve. The city kind of punted once before when Creekview went in on a north-south connector there. I think that a north-south connector from Monaghan Road going north all the way up to 7th Street at some point is going to be critical. The dedication should have happened along probably the eastern boundary of Creekwood when that project was developed. There is an east-west connector about halfway up that connects with Creekview Drive or Creekwood Drive. There's a 60-foot right-of-way as it goes to the east. And I know that property, the Barnes property there on the eastern side of Creekwood, is currently for sale. So I think it's currently in contract with, I understand, although don't quote me on this, but I understand that they're going to be petitioning possibly to be annexed into the city at some point and to have that property be developed. So we're kind of at a critical point here. We're going from agricultural land. I mean, they've been growing hay out there for the 12 years that I've lived in Creekwood, and certainly a lot of agriculture, goes on in that area. So the density is non-existent as far as homes on that property. As we make this transition, as that is urbanized, I think it's critical that we have the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure in place prior to that happening, or at least a plan. If this is being phased, I think that's great. But as those cars leave that subdivision, if they have school-age kids, or if they're going, I agree that some of them will be going down Park Avenue, but quite a few of them, particularly if they're going to the schools, are going to be coming through Creekview Drive. That road is in bad shape the way it is. I think any further impact is, just going to have an additional negative effect. So I did some research, I did some reading on this, and I came up with I found a term, it's a theory actually, and it's called the tyranny of small decisions. And I thought, wow, that sounds bad, what does that mean? So, essentially, it's a series of small decisions that you make as a council, that we make as a city, that then are gonna exacerbate an existing problem, right? So we didn't require Creekwood to figure out that north-south connector then. We're not gonna, we need to, at some point, understand how we're going to make that connection and how we're going to solve that issue, because it's going to have to happen at some point. So those are just a few of the concerns that I have. And the precedent for stipulating off-site improvements for developments is not unique. I know that there were a couple of councilors, I think at least one, that stipulated when the O'Brien Bluff subdivision was done above the wave, there were several off-site issues that were brought up, including acquiring right-of-way and widening O'Brien Avenue, putting in sidewalks, putting in street lights. regrading 10th Street. So there were a number of conditions that the developer had to meet, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars before he went to work on his own site. So there is a precedent there. Perhaps we can understand a way to condition this project to figure out the transportation impact in the future. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate your comments. Who's next? Ben.
Hello, Ben Davis again. I'd like to make a few comments on this project, but to preface that, this project has not been extensively discussed at either of the boards I'm on, so these are my own opinions. But I did want to address a couple things about it. The first one is the amount of affordable housing that comes with this project. In the history of my involvement, I don't think we've ever had a developer who voluntarily contributed this amount of affordable housing as part of their conditions of the project. I do think that's an important community benefit, and I hope that you weigh it as such, and I just wanted to make sure to make that point. The second point is that they, and this is a philosophical point, but I do see in the future that we're going to have a lot more development on the edge of our city boundaries, and this is an example of that kind of a project. And I would like to see, you know, our emphasis be on how do we make that happen in terms of having the right roads, utilities, et cetera. And so rather than putting the kibosh on it right out of the bat. My third point was, and this sort of addresses your question, Frank, was the mechanics of how the deed restrictions are going to work, including enforcement. You know, right now there is a group that is actively working on that as part of our inclusionary zoning, part of our housing initiative that we're doing. And, you know, the mechanics of how that work are being discussed and are going to be discussed over several months. My understanding is that the ordinances that allow this project to happen that are on the books today do require an agreement to be reached with the housing authority or other comparable group for the affordable housing. This developer has reached out to the housing authority once or twice, and we've had some conversations, and I think that's gone well. So I think we will work through that over the next few months is my understanding of how this will work. I would like to see it modeled after how we will be addressing this into the future with inclusionary zoning and annexation policies, et cetera. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Further public comment tonight on this item? Sir.
Brad Knuth, 1150 Warman's Road. We own the property to the west of this development. Some of the concerns I have with the water, I think Sam addressed that a little better than the last meeting. I can see a gravity flow water on the south end of our property, on the city property. The same with the sewer. I can see it running that way. Right now, I've traced water from East 2nd Street Hill down across Armory Road, across the Barnes property, across Warman's Road, down through our property. I've put in riprap, rock, I've enlarged culverts, and the culverts I put in weren't quite large enough. They're handling the water now, but I can't handle anymore. I guess they've addressed about a quarter mile downstream. They're going to look into that. Also, where the drainage flows into Whitefish River, the culvert there overflows just about every year, and that's on the city easement where the main sewer line goes to the treatment plant. Part of this water problem was created probably in the, well, there's been a water problem out there for years. In the 50s, the farmers out there ditched all that property. In the 60s, first of all, I've lived in the 7-block radius 70 plus years, so I know the area. The farmers ditched all that so they could raise their crops. In the 60s, I believe early 60s, they put in the sewer lagoons. It wasn't a treatment plant, it was lagoons. They blocked all the drainage. Now there's a drainage on the south end of our property, a ditch, that ran, well, it runs halfway to the river, and then a dike for the sewage lagoon blocked that off. When I was a kid, the sewage lagoon property, or this treatment plant property, was a hayfield. And if I remember right, there was 3 swales that run down to the river and drained that property, plus all these ditches. So I'm saying that the city has created a water problem out there when they built the treatment or the sewage lagoons, and it's never been fixed. I can't handle any more water down through our place. I mean, right now, there's 2 subdivisions, one across the road to the north and one to the west. I have 19 homes directly or indirectly pumping water onto our property. I can handle the spring runoff, but the continual pumping of crawl spaces and basements is keeping my property, our property, wet all the time. Marshy, I can't cross it with a tractor, I can't farm it. So anyhow, that's the water problem, and I think Sam addressed that. I like what he said. The other one's traffic. When Creekwood went in, I did want Montague, I mentioned Montague going through to 7th Street, eliminate the bottleneck at Muldown. I wanted guardrails down Cow Creek crossing. Neither happened. Creekwood would have been a nice, quiet subdivision if Montague would have went north. But now it's a thoroughfare. And I think the city has taken over, well, I know the city has taken over part of Montague Road, and from the corner of Montague into town on Warman, they've taken that over. We have absolutely no police out there at all slowing traffic down. A lot of people come off Highway 40, hit Dillon, down Warman Road, and they still think they're on Highway 40 when they go by our place. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate your comments and perspective. Michelle.
Michelle Daniels, 1053 Creekview Court. Thank you, City Council, for taking my concerns into consideration. In my opinion, I don't believe Monaghan and Vorman Roads, nor Creekwood Park, Park Avenue, and 10th Street can safely handle additional traffic from a high-density development with regards to the Trailview proposed development. I believe a smarter plan would be to allow a high-density development be built closer to a main road with safe sidewalk connections. Safety and the traffic impact in this quaint rural area are my concerns. Thank you again for taking my concerns into consideration.
Thanks, Michelle. Dick.
My name is Dick Zollner, 1365 Warman Road. There's one person on the planning board who also sat on the growth policy committee, and she voted to deny this project simply because it does not conform to the growth policy, and I agree. And this growth policy took over 16 months to put in place. I think there was 10 neighborhood meetings. Some of them had 100 people at them. There's probably about 40 in here. It was lasted for 16 months. People at the farmers market, they had booths set up, take all this public comment. I'm going to give you what I went over on the growth policy, why I don't like it. First of all, on page 47 of the growth policy, under land use element, it says, for many, the land use element and the land use map are the most critical components of the entire growth policy. The land use element is also the component in the growth policy where emotions ran the highest. Then you go to maintaining the character of a small town feel as a community experiences rapid growth. You go down, it says, when asked if they're comfortable with the current pace of growth, the participants at the community visioning sessions responded overwhelmingly, they are not. Rapid growth can only strain the community infrastructure and its services, and it gives people little time to adapt to the change. This makes them feel alienated and helpless, like they have no control over what's going on. Then you go to the scale. Another factor that can threaten the community character is development that is out of scale with their surrounding neighborhoods. Out there, I haven't seen any 3-story buildings. Landscaping is required for multifamily and commercial development. Structural height is allowed up to 35 feet and can be higher than the homes in the established neighborhoods. Also, the floor area and landscape area is not regulated. Lack of control of these critical factors of community character can and has resulted in structures that are far out of scale with their surroundings. With scale and character being such a significant issue with the public, character-based regulations and neighborhood conservation districts should be carefully considered. And below it is a picture where it says the character-based regulations would prevent structures that are out of scale with these surrounding neighborhoods, and these that are approximately twice the mass of the structures that comprise the existing neighborhoods. Then you go into the zoning. Current zoning is often inconsistent with the existing character and the densities with the residential neighborhoods. When a zoning district applied to a neighborhood allows higher densities and different residential types than those that exist in the neighborhood, the most likely result in a new development and redevelopment will not reflect the character and the quality of the host neighborhood. Then you go on to growth. And they talked about where and how much Whitefish was to grow. They would not set a population threshold, but at the same time, residents wanted the rural lands that surround the city to remain open and free of intense development. That's from community people. Then you go on to preserving open rural lands. Most of the rural land east of Monaghan Road was designated important farmlands. It is important for the production of high-quality hay that is very much in demand both in and out of the Whitefish area. The only reason that stuff stays green in the summer is because of the water that flows across it, gets subbed down into the soil, and you get a second crop. Otherwise, it's going to look like Columbia Falls and all be dry. I don't think that's what Whitefish wants. Another challenge to the development east of Monaghan Road is the proximity of the City of Whitefish wastewater treatment plant. Should the plant and any lagoon system need to be expanded, or if the plant is converted to a mechanical treatment, a marked increase in odors would result. How and at what densities should new developments be planned for Whitefish? As the new neighborhoods emerge through future development, Whitefish residents have expressed a desire that they be consistent in character and qualities with the existing neighborhoods. We're getting all these 3-story buildings in town. They're not being very consistent with neighborhoods. The visiting session participants were most clear in expressing a dislike for relatively high-density housing that they felt is not Whitefish. They talk about another project, I'm not going to name it. When participants were asked if there is a place in Whitefish for higher densities, they generally responded in the affirmative, but it should represent a mix of product types and must, the word must, respect the character and scale of the existing neighborhoods. Then on the transportation part, on page 125, it says in the Whitefish, Southeast Whitefish Transportation Plan examined a number of alternative improvements to the transportation system. Two of the alternatives that were recommended as a future street network were extending Monaghan Road north of Vorman and connecting to 7th Street, and extending Vorman to the west across the river and connecting it to 13th Street. However, any northwest extension of Monaghan would cross undeveloped pasture land and therefore most likely to be developer driven. It can only happen if the agricultural land the Barnes property was to develop. It goes down to say, however, consistent with the concurrency policy recommended in the land use and community facility elements, this growth policy will not recommend that any additional lands in the Monaghan corridor be designated for residential development until at least one additional east-west connection is made. That's a pretty bold statement. And then it goes on about impact of agricultural water facilities. It talks about the impact would defined as the interference of conveyance of irrigated water and or groundwater supplies relied upon by existing ongoing agricultural areas or adjacent neighboring properties as a result of approval of the proposed subdivision. So in other words, if you go and dry out all that land, you're also going to dry out everyone's hayfield. All the trees need water to survive. You're just drying things up and taking it away from agriculture, which, according to this, you can't do. Then, here's a letter from John Wilson, and for those that don't know who he was a public works director of the city of Whitefish for years. He talks about the hydrology in the area. I won't read his whole letter. He talks about the prevailing winds in Whitefish area generally blow from west to east, pushing odors from a treatment plant over the area in question. Given the sewage, it would be a mistake to allow housing of any significant density immediately east or downwind of the plant. The potential consequences could include severely distressed homeowners, lost route, and extremely expensive attempts to resolve an insoluble problem. Just as each individual's reaction to odor is subjective, it is difficult to say how close to the plant, how close is too close to the plant, but we recommend the area between the plant and at least a point of 4,000 to 5,000 feet east of Monaghan Road be designated for agriculture or very low density development. And I also have a letter. Can I borrow one of yours, an extra one?
Here you go.
It's to, it too is it's from John Wilson, let's see. Well, that's a letter I read. So I'm just saying there is a lot of stuff that is directly in defiance of the growth policy, which hundreds of people had input to. And the section that says that the growth policy will not ask for density out there until a road gets put in to be concurrency. I think that's really important out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Further public testimony tonight on this item. Sir.
Thank you, Council, for this meeting. My name is Jeffrey Sanders, 1019 Creekview Drive. I'm not a fourth-generation Montanan, but I'm a four-decade Whitefish observer. And I've seen the sporadic and intense growth around the town. I'm also a retired teacher, and I just would like to, I did not know Dick Zollner was going to make those comments, but I think he encapsulated all the reasons to look out for unintended consequences that happen from projects that may be happening too fast. I think we all agree, you know, housing, this type of housing is needed. The woman on the planning board who said, this is a good plan, but not at this site at this time. The unintended consequences of drainage, of odor, and all the other things that were mentioned, I think the words that Dick just said should really be taken to heart. And again, looking at, it may not be ready for this type of development at this spot at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Further comments tonight from the public? Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Boone, 313 Shady River Lane. And I've lived out in that area for a little over 20 years now and watched the traffic problems as they go. And I really don't think that that can be understated or ignored. And this development, while it sounds like a good development, it just seems like it's in the wrong place. There's no collector for the traffic that's going to be there. The people that live there have to go somewhere, so you got to ask, where are they going to go and how are they going to get there? And I think it would be pretty short-sighted to set up Creekwood as a collector venue. It wasn't designed that way, nor it's just not set up that way. Park Avenue's inadequate and Monaghan Road's inadequate. So there's really no way to solve it until those problems get solved down the road. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Further comment from the public tonight? Further comments? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for questions, discussion, or a motion. Frank.
Wendy, what is the, excuse me, there you are. What is, under the current zoning out there, if somebody wanted to come in as a matter of right, what kind of densities could go on that property?
The zoning is urban. It is a WR1, which is quarter acre lots, so 4 dwelling units per acre. So at 8, what is it, 8, almost 9, you know, they could have 32 at least. A little bit more than that. Do you want me to put up any of the other drawings, like the Google aerial view, or do you want to see that transportation route everybody's been referring to? Yes, please. Okay. So this one, and it's in lavender, it's a little hard to see, it says B3. That's the connection between Monaghan up to East 7th Street. So in the southeast corner of Creekwood, when they did that subdivision, there's a 60-foot right-of-way, is that correct, Karin? I think there's a 60-foot right-of-way for a portion about the depth of that first lot. And then it would presumably veer at some point to get over to East 7th Street. There's a creek crossing, of course, there as well, but that's the transportation route they keep referring to. And then the one across the river, I mean, we've had conversations and discussions about it. It's a pretty wide section, and Cow Creek comes in, and you know, there's a lot of complications with that, and it'd be very expensive, and I'm not sure how viable of an option it is, but it has been in plans for years and years. You want to see the aerial, or any questions about this? So this one just sort of shows. Someone has a pointer. There's a pointer here. Other way. Okay. So the property is kind of in this vicinity here. You can see Creekwood up above, and then here's where 7th is. And that connection would go somewhere in this vicinity. There's Park Avenue.
Wendy, years ago when I was on council, Tina Lawrence brought forward a proposal for this same parcel. It was referred to, I believe, it as Bridgewater. It went through preliminary plat,
And it went all the way to the west, right up next to Shady River.
What was the density that was approved on preliminary plat for that project?
Boy, I couldn't say.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
Yep.
I'm not sure who could answer this question, but do we know, what potential improvements, if any, there are scheduled for that particular area? Sidewalks, road improvements, or trails, bike trails?
Yeah, well, there's been
trails?
discussion about, of course, the paving of Monaghan Road. That would coincide with the completion of the new wastewater treatment plant, except that a portion along this project would likely occur before that. And as far as other improvements right in that area, there's not any immediate plans for improvements along park. And the extension of that connection from Monaghan and Vorman up to 7th Street is dependent upon the development of that property, the adjacent property there to Creekwood. We don't have right-of-way through there, so we can't, it's dependent upon the development of that property. You know, ideally, that would develop first, but we can't control that, so.
Frank?
Wendy, can you, I'm not seeing it. Where is the water treatment plant in relation to this aerial? Is it further, that's what I
South.
thought, further south?
Yeah, it's
correct?
further south, yeah. That's the maintenance, parks maintenance building.
Right, that's what I thought.
Sorry, Katie. And then it's further south of that.
Has there been any discussion of impact of our renovation of the sewer treatment plant and its effect on this particular property, or orders might be emanating from it? Has anybody had a discussion about that? Do we know what the impact will be?
Well, the new wastewater treatment plant is expected to have less odor issues than the existing wastewater treatment plant. So that's, you know, been the main point that's been discussed, is that there should be less odor issues. You know, there is, obviously, you can see Shady River there, and across the river, there's housing now. You know, I understand the concerns that ideally for Public Works, we would like nobody to live near the wastewater treatment plant, so, you know, occasionally there will be odor issues, and it's not ideal for people to live right nearby, but as you can see from that map, this development would not be necessarily as close as a few existing homes out there, so. And like I said, we're expecting the new wastewater treatment plant to have less odor issues than the existing.
Has there been any discussion about traffic calming solutions for Creekwood, given the issues that they're dealing with school commuters and whatnot?
Yeah, so since Creekwood went in, it was probably maybe 8 or maybe 10 years ago, there was a speed hump added on Asher, and then one right at the entrance to Creekwood, because there's been traffic issues there for a long time, because it is, when school starts in the morning, that is a major commute route for parents bringing kids. And then when school gets out, kids are heading to the soccer fields and sometimes speeding through there. So those were added. The fire department, I know, is not crazy about any additional type of traffic calming that slows down ambulances. One thing that was brought up is that there aren't any speed limit signs in the neighborhood. The local speed limit for local roads in Whitefish is 25 miles per hour, so I don't know how much that would help to put up 25 mile per hour signs. So we haven't come up with anything, you know, at this point that would really help slow traffic through that area. At the same time, people have talked about, you know, the roads are in some parts of Creekwood not in the best of shape. And as we fix those roads in the future, of course, then people tend to also drive faster. So that's,
Is a lower speed limit in that area an option, or?
So, yeah, so the speed limit for local roads in town is 25. It's 15 if you're in the school zone. Okay. And so typically would not want to have, 15 mile per hour in just a local neighborhood like this. It might be something that the council could consider, but the problem is then you're going to have an enforcement issue, because you're going to have to enforce a lower speed limit in this area, and then I could also imagine other neighborhoods wanting something similar. But throughout town, through all of our local neighborhoods, it's 25 mile per hour.
Thank you.
Wendy, I had a question, kind of a fact check. A lot of the comments that we received from concerned citizens, I believe, were under the impression that the traffic impact study indicated an increase or projected increase of 684 daily vehicle trips. And
That's what I thought it
the
said.
applicant's representative indicated this evening that it's 684 weekly vehicle trips would be added, and only 137 vehicle trips per day, which would translate to about 45 vehicles traveling through Creekwood versus 230 vehicles, looking at 684 per day. Can you clarify
Yeah,
those
I guess
numbers
I
for
looked
me,
at the
please?
study and it says weekday, so, I mean, maybe the
Weekday,
traffic
okay.
study has a typo. So I don't know, I guess I'd ask the,
Is the traffic engineer, or can the applicant address that discrepancy, please?
and I would just point out too that it's at full build out. The
Right,
first
all three
phase,
phases, yep.
Yeah,
But the difference between 45 vehicle trips per day versus 230 is significant. So I would just like clarification on that.
I'll speak to it. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I did speak with him. He's in Bozeman, unfortunately. My understanding is the 684 is a 5-day work week. The one thing that's very interesting, and probably to clarify from a traffic study standpoint, traffic studies are really an objective study of what's going on. And so when it comes down to saying the traffic study says that there are no impacts, that's a real objective measure of what are the impacts when it comes to staging of vehicles, wait time at stop signs. And so the real reality is when you run the numbers in the traffic study, if we doubled those numbers, we would likely experience that the traffic study would still say those intersections are functioning. Now, what that doesn't say is subjective, and it's very difficult, and I don't think it would really be in the context of an engineering or traffic study to try to assume what the subjective impacts would be. So I want to point out that that's the traffic study is really trying to give you an objective view of how long would a car anticipate waiting at that stop sign to move through and transition, as well as how many cars would a resident or someone adjacent to there expect to see waiting in a queue line. And so based off the traffic study, it was indicated that all of them are currently operating at an A level based off of the National Highway standards, and that when we add this additional load to the development, they would continue to operate at an A level. And generally speaking, we typically see, and when we get to the C and D level is where we really start to look at ways to mitigate specific intersections. So there's quite a bit of leeway, but again, that's an objective assessment.
Thanks for the reply. While I have you up here, regarding stormwater, and I think folks spoke to this very well tonight, and this issue was extensively evaluated in our Whitefish area stormwater system utility plan. When I look at the site plan and acknowledging that the drainage area that contributes to the gentleman's property to the west is several hundred acres in size. I mean, it's a significant stormwater conveyance for our community. I see on the site plan very little room to detain the post-development runoff that would be generated for a project of this scale and given the impervious area. Can you address how that will be addressed?
So I guess the first thing would be to recognize the drainage area that we're going to have associated with the project versus the offsite drainage. We wouldn't be detaining that flow.
Correct.
We'd be trying to utilize improvements to Monaghan to capture it and make sure it's not going onto the property. we did some initial, again, preliminary storm drain design where we created some detention ponds on the north end before it went into the conveyance resource there, and then also again on the south end of it. There's certainly room to determine whether or not there's adequate area shown there, and I think the planning department did acknowledge that they are of the opinion there may not be enough, and we would have to explore utilizing some of the lots in order to do that. I think there's also the opportunity for us to try to incorporate smaller. We did larger regional detention storage, but looking at can we detain some of this in the open spaces so it's less of a, they're more regional and collective. That would be something that would be kind of, I would sort it out in terms of the final design. And a design that you would have the approval of. You know, it's not something that I could just come to the city or the public works director and say, this is what we're gonna do, it works. It would definitely be approved by them. So I think we acknowledge that that's possible. I would highlight one of the advantages of this cluster design is that we are trying to minimize the impervious area that we are introducing to the site. So,
Thank you.
Wendy, are we on a specific timeline that we have to meet in terms of either approval or denying this at this point?
Yeah, there is. For major subdivisions with 50 or more lots, we have 80 working days, once we've given notice that the application is sufficient. So I could do some math here.
Okay, let me know.
That would be July 5th.
We have
Probably actually
We
the
have
6th.
three,
because of
three
Memorial.
meetings between now and July 5th. The 21st of June, I believe the 5th of June because of Memorial Day, and then the 18th of June.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table this item to a date certain. I'd be willing to table it to any date the council feels important. I would like for us to have an opportunity to.
Before you speak to the motion, let's get a second out on the table. So there is a motion to postpone this action. Frank, would you like to keep the public hearing open?
Yes.
Okay, to a date certain, would you like that date to be May 21st?
Be fine.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? To postpone?
I'll second.
There's a motion to postpone to the 21st of May, keeping the public hearing open. Frank, to your motion.
I would like an opportunity for us to look at how we might explain or mitigate some of the concerns that have been raised, both from a water quality and water drainage perspective and from a traffic perspective. I think they're valid concerns. I get, at the same time, I'm of a mixed opinion. If there's going to be development on this site, by right, they could get 32 units anyway, as opposed to, and I know we're talking another 20-plus units on top of that. But I think that not having the infrastructure in place to service what we currently have out there and then adding density, I think we need to recognize that either we're delivering density that we can't service adequately as a city, and maybe that's okay for the time being, but I'd like to look at that because I'm uncomfortable at this particular point, given what we know. So that's my feeling on it.
Thanks, Frank. Further comments on the motion? I guess I'll turn this back to staff. Does this give you, both Public Works, Planning, does this give you adequate feedback regarding the council's concerns in order to evaluate some of these concerns for the meeting on May 21st?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much more information we'll be able to provide.
Right.
But
Understood.
yeah, I understand this is a tough one, so, we may be able to provide a little bit more information on the east-west connector question that came up, though there's nothing planned for that in the long-term future. So.
And I hope that folks in the audience recognize that we've thoroughly vetted east-west potential connections in town, in particular the 13th Street Bridge, which would span both the Whitefish River as well as Cow Creek, which is actually a parkland dedication that was provided when a portion of that development went in. And given the significant span to span both the river and Cow Creek and the floodplain, quite honestly, it's probably unrealistic that in our lifetimes we're going to see a 13th Street bridge installed to help address some of the traffic and level of service those streets provide. And as Karin indicated, we're really kind of hostage until the Barnes property petitions to annex into the city, at which time we can require right-of-way to provide that north-south connection of Montague Road up to 7th Street. So again, our hands are somewhat tied here, and I hope the folks here understand that. Andy.
And get my microphone turned on there. I'll just make a couple. I'll go ahead and support the motion. Whether it's 2, 4, or 6 weeks from now, I think we're probably still going to end up at that point on the first date when nobody knows what to say and we sit around silently trying to come up with the right decision. But we did get a lot of information tonight, and I think just for the public's edification, sometimes it's difficult to hear everything and then try and process it and make a decision all at the same time. Sometimes cooler heads prevail with a couple weeks of being able to digest it. Whether we're going to get more information or not, I don't really see what more we can get, but it's a very difficult decision regardless of which way we end up going, I think, and I just hope if we're going to delay that we all understand that and that when we come back, we are prepared to make a decision at that point.
Thanks, Andy. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle, thanks for your time tonight, your comments, and Stephen for the presentation. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. I think with that said, we're going to go ahead and adjourn for about 6 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. We will reconvene to item 7B, which will be Resolution 18-20, a resolution of the City Council of Whitefish approving an increase in the rescue care program fees currently charged by the Whitefish Fire Department. Chief Page.
You have my staff report on page 589 in your packet. Rescue Care is a program that you guys put into existence back in 2000, which allows residents to pay a yearly fee and then not receive an ambulance bill. We would bill their insurance and then pay the rest of the bill with the money collected into the Rescue Care program.
Chief, I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. Is your mic on?
I don't control that.
Jake?
I'll try now. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so Rescue Care is a program that was put in place back in 2000, and it's a program essentially that collects money from residents on a yearly basis to cover their ambulance bill. We bill insurance, and then we no longer bill them. The money comes out of the pool that we collect. Back then, the rates were set for city residents at $59 annually, and for non-residents, $79. In a review of the money that's paid by the taxpayers, the city taxpayers, I found that they're paying $126 annually more than non-residents. So to make things fair, I'm proposing that we raise the rates to $185 a year for the non-residents.
Okay, questions for Chief Page? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we will hold a public hearing now on what will be our own Resolution 18-20. Any public comment this evening? Public comment on this item? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. Andy?
I would move that we approve our resolution 18-20, which is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana, approving an increase in the rescue care program fees currently charged by the Whitefish Fire Department.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Comments on the motion or discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that passes unanimously as well. Michelle. Thanks, Chief Page. We'll move on to item 7C, a request by GMJ for a conditional use permit to develop 14 condominium cabins located at 514 West 2nd Street, which is currently zoned WR3, which is our low-density multifamily district. Wendy.
Okay, so I have a little site plan up on the screen. It's also in your packets. Access to the site for this 14 freestanding condominium project at 514 West 2nd Street would be located off of West 2nd Street and also West 1st Street. Each unit will have access by a newly developed private road. No sidewalks are proposed along this road, but a meandering sidewalk is proposed throughout the development. Parking is proposed to be surface parking with 2 spaces per unit, but no parking is permitted along the private road. The property is a little more than 1 acre. It's surrounded by residential with the Idaho timber property to the north. The growth policy designation is neighborhood mixed-use transitional, which corresponds to the WR3 zoning district. The property is served by all public services and facilities. We did notice adjacent landowners, advisory agencies, and place illegal in the paper, and we didn't receive any comments. We review conditional use permits according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. The growth policy again designates this area as part of the Highway 93 West Corridor Plan. It recognizes this area as being the western gateway into town, and the public recommended maintaining the residential character of the corridor. We are concerned with the 11-space parking lot at the entrance of the development, as it doesn't maintain that character and gives it more of a commercial feel. So we recommended, and Planning Board agreed, a condition of approval that the parking be tucked behind the dwelling units to preserve and maintain that character and goal of the Highway 93 West plan. Compliance with the zoning regulations, they are meeting all the standards. Each of the units is considered like a single family unit, which requires 2 parking spaces per unit, but there is no overflow or guest parking required or provided with this site plan. The private road is narrow. It's also a fire lane, so there's going to be no on-street parking, and then there's of course no parking on West 2nd Street. So we did recommend a condition of approval that a minimum of 3 guest parking spaces be located within the development. And again, that the parking be located convenient for all of the units. The property, these units are single family, so they aren't subject to architectural review. It's only duplex and up. But there are a number of site standards in this vicinity that kind of apply to this neighborhood that would help better integrate it into the neighborhood. This property is located within the Resort Business Community District, and some of the site plan standards that apply to like multifamily and commercial type projects really could, you know, apply to this particular development, including consideration of pedestrian and bicyclists, making sure that the project is inviting and appealing to pedestrians, minimizing the dominance of parking surfaces at the entrance, and not using large parking lots as the primary feature at entrances. So again, we're still concerned with the large parking area at the entrance of the building. We'd also like to see a connection made all the way out to the sidewalk on West 2nd Street. This project is exempt from landscaping because it's considered single-family units. However, there's a number of existing large trees that contribute to the overall character of this neighborhood. And in order to better integrate into the existing neighborhood, staff will recommend a condition of approval that long-lived healthy trees be identified and retained, and a landscaping plan be completed and installed to fit into the neighborhood. The applicant will be required to do an engineered stormwater plan meeting the city's engineering requirements because the project's likely going to create more than 5,000 square feet of impervious area. Again, this property is going to access off of West 2nd and West 1st Street. West 2nd, no street improvements are required because the highway was redone a bunch of years ago. West 1st Street is an unimproved right-of-way, and the applicant's going to need to work with Public Works to determine the type of improvements needed for access to this right-of-way, and also coordinate with the improvements on the Idaho timber site. The applicant will need to obtain an approach permit from MDT as well. A traffic study is not required for this project because it falls under the 200 trips threshold. The applicant is proposing 1 to 1.5 story units with small footprints, and these units should not overwhelm the neighborhood because that's kind of the character of that neighborhood over there, some smaller scale homes. The project is going to increase the density of the neighborhood, but it's a density that's permitted by the zoning district. I think we kind of talked about all those things. So the planning board held a public hearing on April 19th, and they unanimously recommended approval subject to the 15 conditions in your transmittal letter. Only the applicant spoke. We didn't hear from anyone, any neighbors, no one from the public. Just to hit some of the highlights of the conditions of approval. Again, condition number 4, we'd like to see the 11-space parking lot along West 2nd Street be relocated behind residential structures in a more central location. The internal driveway and parking needs to be paved and signed for no parking. We want the applicant to work with Public Works Department on the design to the access for West 1st Street. The applicant must provide and identify 3 guest parking spaces, provide a location for snow storage. We will not permit any building permits until the roads and water and sewer, kind of like a standard subdivision, until all that good stuff is in, and then we'll allow building permits to be submitted. And then finally, a landscaping plan, including incorporation of those existing healthy trees. Can answer any questions for you. And I also have an aerial map as well. So.
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 7C. We'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony on this item? Or Garth, do you have anything to add to Wendy's staff report as the applicant? Thanks.
Garth Boxich. I am the managing member, address 501 South Carroll Estates Road. I'm the managing member of GMJ LLC, the developer proposing this project. Our support staff, the professionals, Doug Petmeyer with TD&H, he is in Libby, so he's unable to join us. And architect is Matt Lawrence with Montana Creative. He's also tied up tonight, so unable to join us. So any super technical questions? I guess I'm your guy. So anyway, this project is proposed much along the same lines and same concept as the project that was approved 2 years ago up on Nelson Lane. This one is 14 freestanding condominium cabin units. So it's a little different concept than a conventional condo building that's a multifamily, many units within under one roof. Everybody gets your own. It's not a tiny home. They're not tiny. They're tiny homes on steroids. Kind of they're 725 square foot at the smallest. The biggest is they're roughly 1,100 square foot, the largest. So we're talking 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom units. I doubt we'd want to even try a 3 bedroom unit on this property because the goal is to keep these within that range that's deemed through studies as the affordable workforce housing budget, you know, the buyer's budget, under 300,000. So density is key. We have to try to maximize the density to be able to sell these to people who need small homes, who are good with this new tiny home kind of craze, smaller, reduced footprint, 1 and 2 bedroom units. So I think it's a great fit for the neighborhood, and I think if you look at the way the path meanders and you look at First Street up in the north end, we're going to tie right into the master plan for the bike path. Goes right there, right in between us and the Idaho Timber site, and then First Street heads on down to the river, which I believe the bike path is proposed to go right down there, and then we can provide another point to connect back to 2nd Street through our project. But two of the things that will make this this development, this project not possible, and I would ask for the removal of 2 recommendations, and they are both to do with the parking. So we've got recommendations 4 and 9. So as it stands now, what we've proposed meet the requirements for the parking. It's there. That's what the standards are required, and the additional items are recommendations. We're not asking for any variances with the property. We're not asking for anything that doesn't apply. It's strictly what I'm asking for is let's stick to the regs. If they're not the regs, then you know I think we've done it a disservice. But the comment or the idea that parking along 2nd Street gives it a commercial feel, I actually think the exact opposite is true. I put that parking there along 2nd to provide a buffer because 2nd Street is not the little quiet, sleepy street that it was when those houses in the early 1900s, all our neighbors were built. It's a busy road. You get a lot of noise, you get a lot of dust, you get a lot of traffic. If you put your homes toward the road, you don't get a lot of privacy. In addition to that, all of our units are facing north to maximize the views. So the last thing we want to do is take our units and get them closer to 2nd Street and lose privacy, essentially what we're doing by removing the units further off of 2nd Street is we're creating a better residential, a more comfortable residential setting and a desirable setting. What we're doing is we're using some parking right there to buffer the first unit. It's likened to what Mindful Designs has done on several projects on 2nd Street, except they have actually used a commercial building, whether it was a house, a residential home that was renovated and changed into a commercial building, or whether it was like the hair salon that they're working on now, it was already a commercial building. They're using that as the buffer, and then they're setting the residences back behind it. We would be doing the same with the parking, and I did actually have an updated site plan drawn up that shows some additional landscaping and berming right where toward the southwest corner. You see where it says proposed fence right there? So everything's just in between that fence, and it's kind of clear, but I have a copy if each one of you want to take a look at these. They're kind of small, but highlighted. So what we've added is just a berm along 2nd and some additional landscaping to create a better visual buffering, visual screening from Second Street. And if you look at the newer built properties on Second, residential, directly across the street, Tom LaChance built a triplex. He used the same concept. He built the building as far away from the road as he could. Then he built a berm, and then he landscaped the berm so that it is more of a visual screen for that residence. In my opinion, that creates a better residential setting. So the idea that that makes it have a commercial feel, I think, is exact opposite. If it's a commercial feel, you want your property seen. You want the front of that building exposed so that it can be seen from Second. And then, with the nature of Second Street being mixed use, and I believe even more, the city wants it even more to see residential uses in there, I think this is a sound idea. On top of just having that as a buffer, you see where the parking's located? It's located within that front setback. So if we take all those spots out of there, well, right there we lose 4 spots, right there, okay? If we lose 4 spots, every 2 of those spots is equal to about 1 of our cabin footprints. So if we lose those 4, we lose 2 cabins right there. Now, the other item is the additional 3 parking spaces. If we add 3 more guest parking spaces, then we're talking about 7 more parking spaces within the buildable footprint, within the setback. So now 7 spaces, now we just lost 3 units. This project doesn't work if we lose 3 units. Then we have to go back to the drawing board and we have to design larger models, which we can do, that are going to be more expensive, that are not going to fit into that affordable workforce housing budget. It's not the goal of this project. It's not what the city needs. We don't need more $350,000 to $450,000 homes, but we do need these 1 and 2 bedroom units, 725 to 1,000 square feet. That will. The goal is to make them fit into that affordable housing budget. So on the parking standard number 9, that says the applicant must provide and identify the 3 guest parking spaces. So what I want to talk about is this approved change to the city code for off-street parking that now requires 1.25 spaces for studio efficiency apartments and 1.5 spaces for 1-bedroom apartments. This is for multifamily. I don't want to confuse anybody and say that we are multifamily, because we're not. It's not a multifamily development. It is deemed as single-family residences. But we have a lot of similarities. All right, we're creating the same thing. We are creating studio efficiency apartments of 725 square feet. We're creating 1-bedroom units, and these reduced parking would greatly benefit. Now, I'm not asking for the same standards that the multifamily has, because if we did that, we could greatly reduce our 28 spots that are required. So if we had 6 1-bedroom units in this development, and we had 8 2-bedroom units, well, those 6 units would require 1.5 spaces, so that would be 9. The 8 more units at, say, 2-bedroom units would require 2 each. So right there, we'd be down to 25. So we're talking 25 parking spaces versus what we're at right now at 31. So I think that correlation needs to be drawn between what these parking standards are now for multifamily units, and maybe our type of project should also, it should be looked at to try to fit those standards into this type of condominium cabin development. But as it is now, it doesn't. So I'm not asking for those regs. I'm just simply asking that the additional 3 guest parking spaces are not required, just the standard 28 that are the requirement. Any questions? Go ahead, Frank.
Thanks, Garth. Frank?
I hate to be a broken record. You're not allowed parking on your street or your path or your driveway.
Correct.
Are you just anticipating nobody that lives there will have a guest? Or anybody that comes there will not be driving a car?
No, we have 2 spots, 2 spaces designated on that map per unit. There's
Right.
28 spaces.
So a couple has 2 cars, they have a friend over, where do they park?
Well, that same question would be applicable to the multifamily dwelling parking standards that just got passed. So what it's for is for 1-bedroom units are only allowed, are now allowed 1.5 spaces per 1-bedroom apartment.
Right, but you're trading something here because we all know apartment complexes are multifamily. Unless they're designated parking places for those people, and they're not necessarily going to be that, there will be empty parking places available for people to park.
Yeah, not all of these units will be 2-bedroom units. Some of them will be 1-bedroom units, and maybe even the studio efficiency type of unit. So not all of these will be a 2-car family. That is the thought behind the new parking regs that went into the multifamily changes. 'Cause we're the same size as those apartments. Same square footage and same bedroom.
Different building type.
Different building type. So if we connected every one of these buildings and we were now deemed multifamily, if we just connected each unit, just like it's drawn up, but there's, a breezeway or some sort of connection, then those less parking standards would be applicable just simply because now we're called multifamily.
I could argue this. I'm really asking a real question here. Where do you expect a guest to park?
Well, like I said, the 1-bedroom units will typically have there will be a 1-vehicle residence or family, call it.
And they'll theoretically have 2 parking spaces?
Yep, they do. Every unit has 2 spots.
Okay, so they're good. So they've got their 2 parking places, so they can have a guest. So if I've got a 2-bedroom unit, I can't have a guest?
No, you can.
And where do they park?
Your guest has to ride his bike.
I have a question about.
Yeah, I don't mean to.
That's also going to be, that issue is going to be maybe also in the family parking regs that were just brought up or just passed.
Melissa.
I just was going to ask about how they're apportioned. So, if somebody purchases, say, 1-bedroom unit, are they assigned a specific spot or 2 specific spots, or do you just...
They would each, under the current setup, they would each get their 2 designated spaces.
Okay, so regardless of whether you had a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom, you
Correct.
would get
Yep.
the 2 spaces?
Under the regs, we planned it out for 14 units, 28 spots. Each unit has 2 designated parking spaces.
I guess I'm just wondering if you have any room to play with that as far as, if you have a 1-bedroom where they're assigned 1 spot provided, and then the other goes towards guest parking or something. I don't know what that would look like, but.
No,
And I say that having lived in a facility where I was in a 1-bedroom and I was assigned 1 spot, and that's where I had to park. So, and there was, that was a place where there was
I think that would be a
on-street
good
parking,
compromise for every 1-bedroom unit. They get 1 assigned spot, but the way the regs work, I don't think that would change the overall number of parking spaces. I think we'd still end up at 28 spaces total. And that recommendation of the additional 3 was, I think it was kind of based on the fact that same proposal or that same recommendation went into effect on the Nelson Lane property that we had that got prior approval. Same parking count, 2 per unit, plus we put in 3 guest parking spaces. Now, the difference between these two projects is the Nelson Lane is zoned for nightly, weekly rental. So the nature of the nightly, weekly zone properties is going to attract more guests. That's the whole concept of them. Number two, there was already an existing 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home on site at Nelson Lane that is incorporated into that project. So right there, it added, you know, more potential parking. This one is not nightly, weekly zoned. It's not gonna have the same number of guests and visitors per unit as the other project.
Further questions for Garth? We need to go to a public hearing. Thanks, Garth.
Thank you.
Questions arise, we'll call you back up.
Okay.
We did advertise for a public hearing on item 7C of the agenda, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any testimony tonight on this item? Any public testimony? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion or discussion. Andy?
I will make a motion here. Let me find my spot, and then I'll do that. And then if we need to make any changes, we can certainly discuss that. I would go ahead and move that we approve a request by GMJ for a conditional use permit to develop a 14 condominium cabin at 514 West 2nd Street, Zone WR3.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ryan. Michelle? Andy?
Not quite sure what we do about the parking issue here. I think Garth makes a pretty good argument that I'm partially swayed by. Obviously, smarter heads than me came up with those numbers, so I'm not quite sure what we do. So.
Katie?
I would like to make a motion to make a friendly amendment to strike condition number 4.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment to strike condition number 4?
And which is the 11-space parking lot along West 2nd Street must be relocated behind residential structures in a more central location.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment?
I will second under the condition that it's further amended that a appropriate landscaped berm be placed in the area that's been indicated on the map, and that it serve the purpose of, in fact, sheltering and or shielding that parking area.
I'm okay with that.
Is that okay with the first?
I am great with that.
Okay. You want to repeat that just for the record, Katie?
Yes, I'm making a friendly amendment to strike condition number 4 with the addition, and then actually just rephrasing condition number 4, that the 11-space parking lot along West 2nd Street stays in its original design. However, a mounted landscape and berm must be constructed alongside West 2nd Street as a barrier and shelter from traffic and sight.
That's okay with the second, Frank?
Yep.
Okay. Further discussion on what will be friendly amendment number 1, amending condition number 4. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle, which brings us back to our original motion, which is for approval as amended. Further discussion on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Garth. Appreciate it. We'll move on to our last public hearing tonight, which will be item 7D, ordinance 18-14, an ordinance of the City Council amending Title 5, Chapter 3A, Dangerous Dogs of the Whitefish City Code. Angie.
So I have our naughty dog ordinance.
So our dangerous dog ordinance was passed 25 years ago, which I thought was an exceedingly long time until I realized that's when I graduated from high school. So I like to think of it as a relatively new ordinance that we're going to change. It kind of came to our attention because, pardon me, we had a report of an aggressive dog at the Wag Dog Park and also on the Whitefish Trail, which dog actually ended up biting somebody, which isn't necessarily our jurisdiction given its county, but it did cause Maria and my prosecutor and I to take a look at our dangerous dog ordinance. And it's a little outdated and it's really burdensome. It places enforcement responsibility on an animal control officer, which we haven't had for several years. And it has this kind of long, drawn-out process where the animal control officer investigates complaints, and then the chief of police has to appoint a dog panel of these dog experts, 5 dog experts, which to my knowledge, Bridger can correct me if I'm wrong, has never happened. And then this panel determines whether the dog is dangerous and imposes these conditions, and then it goes to Muni court. So it's just this kind of process that we've never really followed. So we really haven't been citing people for dangerous dogs. We have been citing them for dog at large. So we took a look at it and we kind of just revamped it and streamlined it, and we would like to treat dangerous dogs as a misdemeanor as we would any other misdemeanor that the police investigate, and then it's charged in municipal court and it goes through a trial process. And we've articulated in the ordinance some of the conditions that the judge can impose if somebody is found guilty of possessing a dangerous dog. Judges have, wide discretionary ability in sentencing anyway. But some of the conditions that the judge could impose was, restraining the dog on the owner's property, requiring signage, police notification of a change in address or dog ownership, banning the dog from city parks and the dog park, requiring the dog to be muzzled, and spaying or neutering the dog. The ordinance would also require that the owner, if they're convicted, register their dog as a dangerous dog with the police and pay a fee, basically a yearly fee. And we took it to the park board simply because that's kind of where the problem, not the park board wasn't the problem, but a dog in the dog park was where the problem originated. And the park board recommended unanimously that we approve the ordinance with some language that Frank suggested that limits when the judge could actually order a dog euthanized. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but with that, staff recommends approval of the ordinance.
Thanks, Angie. Any questions for Angie on her staff report? Not seeing any for now. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 18-14, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony? Jim, I knew you were here for something.
The WAG, Jim Lockwood, I live at 4715 Highway 93 West. I'm the president of the WAG nonprofit that essentially built the dog park. And we were fine with the proposed ordinance because it does simplify a rather cumbersome ordinance that really wasn't working too well before. We had 3 concerns with the proposed ordinance when we reviewed it with Parks and Recs. The first of which was raised by you, Frank, and had to do with when a dog be euthanized. And you really didn't explain, Angie, how you, the proposed ordinance said, upon conviction, a court may order the dog to be euthanized. And the conviction is a dangerous dog. And the proposed ordinance proposed the definition of a dangerous dog as any dog which bites or attempts to bite any person or other animal without provocation and not in defense of person or property. Well, that's pretty subjective and open-ended, and is a lot less definitive than the current definition, which is a dangerous dog is defined as one who, when unprovoked in an aggressive manner, causes serious bodily injury to or kills a person or bites or kills a domestic animal while off the owner's property or after a dog is found to be potentially dangerous bites or attacks or endangers the safety of humans. So my first question is, how does the definition now in the revised ordinance compare the definition of a dangerous dog to the current ordinance?
Well, Jim, part of the reason that we changed the definition is we understood WEG's concerns to be if a dog attacks another dog, whereas typically the police haven't enforced that as a criminal matter. It's been a civil matter if a dog attacks another dog. As far as bites or attack being subjective, I agree, but I also think that our police officers have discretion whether or not to cite somebody, and they use that really well. They're not going to use it if a dog nips at another dog, and that's not their job. They're going to use it if, they feel it's a threat.
Well, this definition says, a dangerous dog is any dog which, and it doesn't say unprovoked, attempts to bite. When dogs are just roughhousing, they're doing a lot of open mouth stuff, and I mean, technically, you could just take a typical situation where dogs are playing and their mouths are open, and you could make the case that a dog is attempting to bite, and if he was convicted under this definition, he could be euthanized. So those are my two concerns.
Yeah, no, and I understand your concerns. I think if the police officers responded to an incident where the witnesses said the dogs were just playing with each other, they're probably not going to waste their time by citing somebody. If for some reason they got overzealous and did cite somebody, that's, what the jury and the judge is for. There's also an affirmative defense built into the statute that if the dog is protecting his owner or the owner's property, that they can bring that out in trial.
Are you talking about the justifiable use of force? Is
Correct.
Okay. So did you make a change on when a dog could be euthanized?
I did, actually, and I think it was actually Frank's maybe suggested language. I'm not quite sure. I might have played off it, but if you look at 5-3-4B, it says, upon conviction, the court may order the dog to be euthanized in accordance with the severity of the injury. And I think that was kind of Frank's point at Park Board, as that dogs should only be euthanized if it's a severe injury.
Could you say? So that's upon one conviction per that definition of a dangerous dog.
Well, if
That's a big difference between what we have now. Yeah.
It is, but then
Yeah,
again, if a
it's
dog
huge.
kills somebody, I tend to think that the judge would probably have the discretion to order the dog euthanized. So again, it's trusting the judge and trusting the jury and trusting the judicial process.
Well, it's no longer a panel of three people. Now it's a court, right?
Well, it's a jury. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
panel
it's
of
a jury.
6 people and a judge.
All right. I would just suggest that we might consider making that definition a little closer to the current definition. In other words, at least it's a dog when unprovoked does this sort of thing. That kind of language could go back in there. That changed, and the only other issue we had was, and I think you may have fixed this, was the new ordinance defined a dog at large. In other words, the requirement to be leashed is on all city property. Well, our dog park is a leashed, unleashed, no leash dog park, and so we needed a distinction made between the dog park and other city property.
And Jimmy thought about making that change, but I think it's well known that the dog park is an off-leash park and the police aren't citing people for having their dogs off-leash in the unleashed dog park.
But technically, then we'd be in violation of the ordinance, because all our dogs are off-leash in the dog park.
Yeah, but it's signed, and I think that's understood.
Maria?
Policy also states that it is an off-leash dog park, so the park policy established by the park board states that they can be off-leash, which would then allow them to be off-leash and not dogs at large.
Okay, but for the consideration of the council, I still think that that section of the ordinance, 535A, that defines a dog at large, I think it should make a distinction between the dog park and other city properties.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your comments tonight. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Angie. Further public comment tonight on this item? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion. Katie?
I will move to approve ordinance 18-14, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, amending Title 5, Chapter 3A, Dangerous Dogs of Whitefish City Code.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Seconded by Ryan. Further discussion on the motion? Frank?
Angie, let's just walk through this for me, if you will. If we put any registered, so you were talking about 53A5? 5.3.
Are you talking about the at-large mean?
Yeah. Hey, we're talking about a dangerous at-large dog. Is that your concern?
Well, just 535A is the section large, and it simply says that no dog can run large on any street.
Jim, can you please approach the podium? Frank's addressed you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it currently says, I believe, that no owner, keeper, or harbor of any dog shall permit such dog to run at large on any street, alley, avenue, park, or public ground of the city, or to trespass upon any property or private property owner, not the owner, keeper, or harbor of such dog within city limits. Blah, 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 blah. And all such dogs, it goes on to say, shall be essentially restrained on a rope or a leash. And I'm suggesting that there should be an exception in here. I would say on any property except for the Whitefish City dog park.
So I'm having a hard time following you, Jim.
Well, I wasn't
Give
prepared.
me the section number you're concerned about again, if you would.
Angie?
So Frank, it's actually in a different section of the code. It's not in the dangerous dog sections. It's in the dog at large section, which
Okay.
is like, I think 5.3 with no A.
Yeah, the dangerous dog section refers to this section 535, and that's the at-large section, section 535A. Do you have that?
Help me find it.
I'm not seeing it. What page? Do we know?
Yeah, it's in a completely different section.
Like, so it's not even here?
It's not in this, it's not in this
Not in
ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So it's not relevant to this, it's not really relevant to
Well,
this public hearing, Jim.
her definition of dangerous dog, it says, dangerous dog means any dog which bites or attempts to bite any dog or animal without provocation, not in defense of person or property. Any dog while running at large, see section 535, which bites or attacks a person or animal shall be deemed a dangerous dog. And so that 535A is the section that talks about animals at large. So somewhere, whether it's there or somewhere else, I think we need to distinguish between the dog park and all other city property.
And I think you've heard from our city attorney and our parks director that it's not necessary at this time.
Right.
And that we have to rely on the judicial system, the discretion of our police force, which we have full faith and confidence in to make the right decisions and to use logic when addressing dog issues. So, anything further? Further comment or discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Jim. Which brings us to item 8A. Bailey, item 8A, which is a request from Glacier Ranch Holdings LLC for a boundary line adjustment to go from a total of 8 lots down to 6 lots located at 2054 and 2060 Houston Drive in 2016, 2024, and 2032 East Lakeshore Drive.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
So the Whitefish subdivision regulations permit certain revisions to platted subdivisions, including the relocation of boundary lines, with 5 or fewer lots as an exemption to subdivision review. So these are approved administratively in our office. You don't ever see these, and they can range for numerous reasons. The regulations further state that if a change is made to a platted subdivision that affects over 6 lots, that it comes to the city council for review and approval prior to going to the clerk and recorder's office to be recorded. So the applicant's representative submitted a request for a boundary line adjustment, as the mayor stated, to go from 8 lots down to 6 lots. The parcels are zoned WSR, which is our suburban residential district. That requires a minimum lot size of 1 acre. Additionally, the minimum lot width in the WSR zoning is 130 feet wide. So most of the current lot configurations, they do comply with the 1 acre minimum lot size, but they don't. Most of them are less than 130 feet in width. There's actually, I think there's 3 of them out of the total 8 that actually comply with that minimum lot width. So the proposed boundary line adjustment will result in the reduction of 2 lots. So 2 of the 8 will be aggregated in with their neighboring parcels. And then they're going to reconfigure them so that each lot will now have lakeshore access and road frontage access. So they'll go back to being up and down, north and south perpendicular. The current plat there's like one down in the south, and there was some weird configurations. So the non-conforming lot widths, they will all increase in size. Only one of them will end up meeting current standards, but basically they'll be making the non-conforming properties bigger, more towards the conforming side. The applicant actually came forward to our office to try to talk about this because they thought of doing, half and half. Do we do 1 subdivision exemption for 4 lots, but then we have 1 lot that's really, really tiny, or, and come in for a second one? And we just said, what, it's better just come in, do all of it in one lump thing so we can see the whole picture instead of trying to make something work that didn't really work in that process. So staff is recommending that the council approve the requested boundary line adjustment affecting all 8 lots, as the lots will come closer into conformity, and they're not evading subdivision review. So, and I'm happy to answer questions since I think this might be the first one in at least before I was here, so at least the last 4 years. So, yeah.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Not seeing any.
Okay.
Thanks, Bailey. Discussion or motion? Ryan.
I would move to approve the request from Glacier Ranch Holdings LLC for a boundary line adjustment to go from a total of 8 lots down to 6 lots located at 2054 and 2060 Houston Drive and 2016, 2024, and 2032 East Lakeshore Drive.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Katie. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle, thanks, Bailey. And we'll move on to item 9. You have Adam's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Adam? Adam, anything else to report on?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
I was going to suggest, unless you feel compelled to give the quarterly financial update, that we postpone that to May 21st, if that's okay with you and the council, since Dana's not here.
Yeah, that's fine.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. Which moves us on to communications from the city council. Andy?
Apologize for my absence last meeting. Always good to be back. It's exciting. Dave, if you could, just for Creekwood, if you could have someone pull the minutes when that was approved, I'd just like to, I remember we had a discussion about right-of-way dedication at least 30 feet on their eastern boundary. So we did discuss it, and I don't remember why we didn't require it 100%. Part of it, I think, is because we required the build of the extension through to Asher Avenue, and I think there was some kind of trade-off there. But it might, you know, be at least something we could look at and give us a little better idea, because obviously Monaghan Extension is kind of a big deal there, and why we thought it should all go onto the Barnes property, I'm wondering if we had a good rationale for that, so. I'll look that up. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Ryan?
Nothing.
Thank you. Katie?
Happy birthday, Jake. Nothing else.
Frank?
On that same front, David, it was referenced earlier that we approved a development many years ago called Bridgewater for that property. Could you pull that and see what we had in the way of numbers of units and what was developed and what the connectivity discussions were at that time?
Happy to do that. I mean, when we did that one, I know it was WR1 zoning, and I think with a PUD overlay, so it was probably similar in density.
Right.
Yeah, because there was a 10% density bonus on that one, too.
Yeah.
That was part of the.
So I'd like to look at that one, or at least see what the history is out there. And so, thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Melissa?
Nothing to add.
I will try one more time. Did we get any progress on our retreat date?
I was hoping we'd have everyone here tonight to finalize. But maybe we could throw out some dates that I could run by Richard.
Okay. Is everyone still interested in giving us one last attempt?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we are in 2020. No, I'm just kidding. We could be in, you know, mid to late May all the way through June. I think our first budget meeting is next Wednesday, correct, Adam?
The 29th.
29th, excuse me, okay.
I will be gone until our meeting on the 21st
Okay.
of May.
And I leave the day after that.
When
And
do
I'll
you-
be gone for the remainder of the month in May.
Okay.
And I will be gone until our first meeting in June. Basically, I'm here for our Monday meetings until the 11th of June.
You're gone through the 11th?
Yep, only
Okay.
here for city council meetings.
How does the week of June 18th look for everyone?
Good.
Great.
Yeah, that's fine.
The week of the 18th, how does that look for you,
work.
Melissa?
Yeah, works for me.
Frank?
Yeah.
Katie?
Yes.
Ryan?
Currently okay.
Andy? Not currently okay?
Currently okay.
Okay.
I can
So would
probably
you
try
still
work
like to
around
shoot for maybe the Thursday, Friday? Kind of off location down in Sealy, I think is what we discussed.
that. Solstice.
Solstice.
Oh, it gets weird down there.
Could be
Yeah, if
very
you don't mind,
significant.
Adam, let's maybe ask Richard if he would be available the afternoon of Thursday, June 21st, and we'll just carry over into the 22nd or some combination like that.
Will do.
And you're available as well?
Yes.
Okay. Great, and I think that's all I had. Anything further from staff? Do you guys have clarity leaving this evening on our requests? Any additional input needed? No? Okay, how about council? Thanks, we're adjourned.
And don't forget about our meeting on Monday. Next Monday.
Oh, yes.
For interviews.
What's that?
For the interviews.